Welcome to our very important council meeting for this, the 20th of June. And this morning, Councillor Blackmore was to open our meeting. Unfortunately, she's not here. She has a sick son. But she wrote an amazing poem which kind of sums us up to where we are with LTP. So I'm going to give it a go. Apologies, Lara, if I don't do it with the same finesse that you would have. It started with a gathering at Himatangi Beach. We shared our vision, hopes and dreams, something from us each. Red wine, white, carbonated, we shared a wee bit more. Most of us had left the room before anyone hit the floor. The orientation bus trip extended what we knew. From here to there and everywhere, we learnt a bit more too. No amount of prayers or pleading would wisen up this lot. I'll introduce each of us, show you what we've got. Her worship heads the table, steadies the ship along the way. If you want to throw a party, celebrate 150 years, be sure to invite Helen. She'll organise the beers. Michael is the deputy, a badge worn with great pride. His emails verbose and lengthy. Let's hope he's on your side. The matriarch is Alison, the unofficial archives. What she don't know ain't worth it, though. You'd better be her friend. Lord Stanway runs the water scheme, an empire in the making. He's been up since 2. I guess he'll do. At least Colin's not someone faking. LGNZ has lost its head. Grant's gonna lead the coup. A bunch of drongos, a load of bollocks, bureaucracy's finest zoo. Andrew won't be happy till the gravel has been cleared. We hear about it all the time. It fills me with much dread. As long as the bridges, roads and ditches get attention, Steve is happy. The monarch of the northern Manawatu holds court down at the tavern. King or jester, he'll just pester Hamish for a living. Fiona's checked the fine print, researched the underwriters. Something's off. Let's not scoff. It might just be the flu. Now, Kerry is quite quiet. Are we sure he's on the bus? A metaphor, I'm sure. Someone should check the loo. Stuart is our numbers guy. He checks on them daily. Audit and risk. He might just frisk those journals for some gravy. See, Bridget is our wild card, a rare bird round these parts. She has to work very hard to get across the rohi. I guess you know she's connected though and on the list of to party. As for me, well, I guess we'll see. We're only halfway through. The orbiter goes round and round and round and round again. Today's agenda feels much the same. I've seen these documents before. The LTP has got to be the biggest job of them all. David's run a hot review and results are in. It's an engagement for the win, but I'm glad it's over too. So well done, and what a shame she couldn't be with us this morning to read it. But we'll post it, I think, that one. Right, apologies, Councillor Quarry is on approved leave, so we can go to item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes on page, yes. So Councillor Blackmore is an apology, so I'm happy to move that apology. Seconded by Councillor Ford. Put the motion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried, thank you. Recommendation for the confirmation of minutes on page 7. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 6th of June 2024 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Quigley, thank you. Put the motion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Item 4 is declaration of interest. Any of the topics on agendas today, any of our team wish to declare?
Might affect our roads. No.
None, thank you. So we move to item 5. This is public forum, and welcome this morning we have Mark Wasley. Welcome, Mark, to the table, well known to us all. You wanted to talk to us about local government in respect to the electoral legislation and Māori wards and Māori constituencies amendment bill. We have 10 minutes in total, Mark, but please allow some time. There may be some questions.
That is very kind of you, because I was worried when I was writing my speech. It was a bit long, but 10 minutes is perfect. How do I follow that great poem this morning? Tēnā koutou, your worship, me war boys, councillors, chief executive, management and staff and members of the public. Ko Makawazi tuku ingoa no helkama hou kei aorangi tōku kāinga anaane. For those who don't know, my name is Mark Wasley and I'm from Helcombe, now living in Fielding. I grew up here and have lived here for most of my life. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the death of jazz musician, trombonist and educator Roger Fox while we're here this morning. Roger died on May 27 and was well known as a leading figure in these fields, probably most for the Roger Fox Big Band, established in 1973. It's no surprise that his involvement stretched to Manawatu, directing and organising the Manawatu International Jazz and Blues Festival since 2000 and forming a relationship with Fielding Brass, which involved playing his trombone at the last night of the Proms concert in 2008 and adjudicating the Fielding Festival of Bands. I'm sure you'll agree his passing is a great loss to New Zealand music. Now, 3 years on from deciding to establish a Māori ward in the district, the government has brought this matter back into Parliament with new legislation, the Local Government Electoral Legislation and Māori Wards and Māori Constituencies Amendment Bill. I'm here to express my deep disappointment in the Council's approach and actions around this bill. I invite you to turn to page 292 of today's agenda, the Council's submission on the bill. While those who would like to do that, I'd like to acknowledge Councillors Bell, Short, Blackmore, Belsky and Quarry, who made individual submissions on the bill, and there was one made by Michael Ford, which I couldn't verify was the Deputy Mayor or not. Let's look at the timeline around the bill. On May 16, Council resolved by majority decision to not support the disestablishment of its Māori ward, and that a submission will be made to the Parliamentary Select Committee amongst other motions. They also issued a media release about this. On Monday, May 20, the bill was introduced to Parliament and its content made public. The Department of Internal Affairs also informed councils of this by email. On Wednesday, May 22, Local Government New Zealand sent an open letter to the government that it had circulated to mayors and regional council chairs, co-signed by 52 mayors and chairs and the co-chairs of Te Manawatu, LGNZ's Māori Advisory Group, opposing the government's Māori wards and constituencies proposals. More on this soon. On May 23, the bill passed its first reading and was referred to the Justice Committee. Submissions were open from May 24 to 29, closing at 11:59 p.m, totalling 6 days, including 4 working days. Council lodged its submission on May 28. Select Committee hearings were held from June 4 to 6, and on June 21, tomorrow, the committee's report is due. Definitely a tight time frame, and I have some sympathy for you as the bill absolutely requires Council's attention and in the crunch time of the long-term plan. I support the idea of the submissions assessment panel and the efficiencies it brings, but the content of submissions on matters of high significance should come to a Council meeting before lodgement. The Local Government Act 2002 and Council's Significant Engagement Policy, which was due for review in March 2024, by the way, defines significance as in relation to any issue, proposal, decision or other matter that concerns or is before a local authority, means the degree of importance on the issue, proposal, decision or matter as assessed by the local authority in terms of its likely impact and likely consequences for the current and future social, economic, environmental or cultural well-being of the district or region, any persons who are likely to be particularly affected by or interested in the issue, proposal, decision or matter, the capacity of the local authority to perform its role and the financial and other costs of doing so, and something that is significant as having a high degree of significance. I say that includes governance and representation. The submission, which you're hopefully looking at now, is not consistent with the May 16 media release. That suggested a more united stance on the importance of Māori representation for our community. Data from Census 2023, released on May 29, shows that the Māori population in Manawatu district has increased 19.3% since 2018 to 5,946, and that is now 18.3% of a whole district population of 32,415, up from 16.5% of the district. There is undue influence on differing views within the submission. All motions on May 16 were resolved by a majority, and this should be the substantive narrative of the submission in all submissions. Council submissions on the Building Earthquake-Prone Buildings Amendment Bill, Smoke-Free Environments and Regulated Products Smoke Tobacco Amendment Bill, inquiry into the 2022 local elections, and a new one, the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Bill, made no mention of differing views. The submission also didn't state support for LGNZ's submission. After reviewing the submissions made by other councils in the Horizons region, namely Horizons, Palmerston North City Council, which I've got here, and Horowhenua District, it's apparent theirs had more thought and were much more substantial, spanning multiple pages and addressing particular concerns with the bill in detail. Councillor Hadfield will be pleased. I also read the Kapiti Coast District Council's submission, another well-detailed submission. Okay. The Chief Executive's report for the May 16 meeting indicated the Council should engage further with iwi leaders to clarify whether they wish to collaborate for presenting it to Select Committee. What happened here? The submission did not state if Council wanted to make an oral presentation, and they didn't. PNCC and Rangitikei TK District Council made oral presentations, and I'm not sure about Horizons. Then there were the formatting and punctuation issues within the submission. The fourth paragraph is missing essential macrons, the Mayor has no name or position, and the footer also needs updating to include a macron in Manawatu. So this is probably a reminder to update letter and submission templates. Finally, I was quite surprised to see when the LGNZ open letter was published that the Mayor's signature was not included. Given the resolutions made the previous week and publicity, it's embarrassing not being included. I note that when the submission assessment panel was established on June 16, 2022, Council meeting minutes read, it was noted that consultation matters of a major nature would be brought before Council for consideration and decision, should timeframes allow. I also note that the Chief Executive's report for the May 16 meeting included, if the Council resolves to make a submission on the bill, officers will draft this at the appropriate time and bring it back to Council for approval, and various verbal discussion between elected members and the Chief Executive on whether the content of the submission will be approved by email or at a Council meeting and whether it will include differing views. So, while I support the idea of the submissions assessment panel, submissions on matters of high significance should be brought to a Council meeting before lodgement to ensure the content reflects the majority resolutions made by elected members. I believe there was a sufficient time to do this, as there was a meeting on May 23, and I am conscious it already had comprehensive deliberations on the long-term plan. Alternatively, an extraordinary meeting could have been held. Ngā mihi nui, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I am conscious of your heavy agenda today, but would welcome a brief discussion on this matter.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Well researched and put together. Let's open. Are there questions only? Any questions from our team? None? Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your time this morning, and thank you for the interest that you take in council matters.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Kia kotahi mai.
Right, item 7 is notification of late items, and we do have a item today. This is the report relating to the adoption of the Planning Services Charges and the Food Act fees and charges 2024 to 25. Is presented as a late item, as this is required to be adopted this financial year and therefore cannot wait till a future meeting. So I'm happy to move that the report relating to the Planning Services Charges and Food Act fees and charges 2024 to 25 be accepted as a late item. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. So we will deal with that later in our agenda. Item 8, a recommendation from committees. The first one is the Audit and Risk Committee, the Risk Management Policy, and we're on page 14. Welcome, Ash and Francis.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this has come from Audit and Risk. So some of you would have been on that committee and part of that discussion. It's been endorsed by them with one change, which is now reflected in your attachment, specifically that section 2.1. around sort of training and development for both elected members and staff in relation to risk management. The only bit I'll highlight in there is that we've indicated that elected members should receive training on it prior to the appetite statement, which earlier on in the document you'll see is one of the earlier phases of the risk management overview in terms of timelines. So this is now with you for adoption and amendments. One thing I'll highlight as well is the annex on the risk appetite. We workshopped that some time ago, but this is another opportunity for you to suggest any changes as it forms part of the formal adoption of this policy. And aside from that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Ash. Thank you. Councillor Campbell, as Chair of Audit and Risk, anything you want to add?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is a piece of work that's been with the Audit and Risk Committee for some time, and it's very pleasing to bring it to council. A risk management framework or risk policy is a pretty important document in terms of managing risk, which this organisation has a lot of. So I want to thank Ash for leading the charge and bringing this to us. I think it's an important document. It'll help us with a number of things, including identifying and mitigating risks. Should help us with our strategic decision making, protecting our assets, minimising our losses, and some continuous improvement and review of all risk matters. So it's quite important, and I hope we can successfully adopt it across the organisation. So yeah, thank you. I'd recommend that we adopt it. I think it's a good document.
Any further questions, comments? Councillor Underwood.
I'm just looking at page 25 and item 6.1, effectiveness of controls. It lists the controls there that are used, but doesn't talk about the effectiveness of them. I'm just wondering that heading, whether there should be something in there about how controls are monitored to see whether they are effective, because that doesn't really tell us. And then the next section, which goes on saying control improvement, I presume that's when the controls are ineffective, that we go to that plan.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So in the risk assessment tool, it does touch on the effectiveness, whether it's current and fully effective or partially effective or planned. But you're right that it doesn't state that there, and we could insert that into that part of the policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Campbell.
So just one more thing, the clause you've added, which you didn't have at the Audit and Risk Committee 2.1 about training, I think the way that you've written that, Ash, is just referring to council elected members, but I think the idea of that clause was that training should be applied to the whole. This is a whole organisation document. It should probably refer more generally to the whole organisation rather than just specifically saying elected members.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
I was just going to note that the following paragraph covers the officers' training. So the first paragraph, the first part of the paragraph is around elected members. The second part is around officers.
Okay. Right.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just really pleased we've got to this point, and I have been pleasantly surprised at the risk appetite statement that in terms of legal compliance and health, safety, wellbeing, we're pretty risk averse, which is what you'd expect. But actually, we're cautious and open in a lot of other areas, which I think is really positive. So it's but until we went through the process, we didn't know that. So I think that's been really useful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. I agree. Thank you. So if there's nothing further, Councillor Campbell, would you like to move the recommendation on page 14?
Yep, very happy to move that council adopts the risk management policy as referenced in the attachment 1 without amendment.
Without amendment, or with, given that we've talked about a couple of items?
Anything further to add? What would you change?
We could just add a blurb around section 6.1 that be expanded on as discussed.
So therefore it would be with amendments.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Righto.
Amendment to paragraph 6.
Yeah, with an amendment to paragraph 6.1. Councillor Campbell, are you happy with that? Thank you. Have a seconder, Councillor McFadden. Open it up for discussion, questions, anything further? None? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right, we move to page 30, and this is the Audit and Risk Quarterly Report to the 31st of March. Right, who's taking us through this one? Amanda, is this you or Joel?
It's all the GMs, it's a quarterly report.
Oh, it's our quarterly report, absolutely. That went through audit and risk. Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I can comment on it. I think we did review this reasonably extensively at Audit and Risk, but the highlights were that council revenue for the period was below what was expected, but council expenditure was down even more. So the operating surplus to the end of the quarter was somewhat better than expected at a $1.1 million surplus versus a projected deficit of 2.4 million. So satisfactory result, I think. And as usual, the capital expenditure program is running somewhat behind where we were expecting it to be, but we were assured that work was on track and everything would be completed in due course.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Underwood.
In item 3.4, where it talks about the liability management policy, we're not currently compliant, but in the last paragraph there, it mentions that we are expected to reach compliance in May, June. Just wondering if that has happened or is likely to happen.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Councillor. It is something that we're currently working on with Miles from Bancorp. So what we've got is a amount of, just to briefly tell you what the non-compliance means, it's about how much debt we have on that's fixed and how much is on floating. And the amount that we have between the two is outside of our policy bands at this point, or as at March. We're working with Miles, so as stuff matures, as some of the debt matures, to fix it down to get us back into the policy bands. And to be sure if we're going to be 100% compliant by 30th of June depends on how much we complete by the 30th of June of our capital works program and what I draw down to fund that. So it may not be till July at this stage because some of the work's running a bit behind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further in this report? We did cover it in length at Audit and Risk. If not, then there is two recommendations on page 30. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, again, I happily move that Council receives a quarterly performance report and Treasury report to 31 March 2024. And two, Council notes the current non-compliance with regard to the interest rate risk management area of the liability management policy is outlined in section 3.4 and the plan to be compliant going forward.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? I'm happy to second that. Any further discussion? None. I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. Right, so we move to item 9. This is our regular reporting from our committee and group meetings for our information. The full agendas are available online at those links, but opportunity for liaison councillors to highlight what's going on in their respective communities. Audit and risk, we're covering much of that today. Councillor Hadfield, Apathy. You're Apathy? No, it's, sorry, Councillor Belsky. Yes.
There's nothing too much to report from Apathy. They're getting their generator over to the hall, and the hall has now become will be the civil defence location. and are just working with Hannah on the radio and etc. But all in all, it's in good shape. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Bell, Rangiotu Bay Nessie.
Morena, we've had 20 trees planted between the hall up to past the Utapa where the marae is. So that's pretty exciting. We've got 10 more to plant, or they have 10 more to plant. There are concerns at the moment at Rangiotu, and they've expressed that in the meetings around burglary and theft, particularly around petrol vehicles. They're also, the biggest concern they have at the moment is the length of time it takes for broken down cars and cars around Pike Road that are still there now that have had car accidents. So that's been a bit of a nuisance for our committee. At the moment too, they're looking at sort of widening the committee and more people joining in and having a look. And last night we had 2 other young members join our space, which was really exciting for them. They're also excited that a lot of the committee members in the community are performing this weekend at the Regent for their band. It was quite a comedic note last night, actually, that Alan expressed that this is their 6th time trying to get the band together because either someone's gone blind, someone's gone deaf, or someone's passed away. So they're looking for young people, particularly around the Toblerones or drummers, to join their band so they can sustain it. But I look forward to seeing them on Saturday.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Councillor Underwood, Huanui.
The committee managed to arrange to have their war memorial moved, which had sort of been engulfed by the school expansion and wasn't in a prominent position. They managed to move it in one piece, plinth and all, which was very interesting for the children that apparently came out of school to watch. And that saved them several $1,000s in having to build a new plinth. They received funding from NZTA for their pathways. It's been approved to $250,000 on 3 conditions, which they are endeavouring to meet so that they can receive that funding towards their big pathway. And they also have lost a few members who have resigned, and they're calling an AGM on Tuesday, the 23rd of July, where they're calling for nominations from people to join the committee, and they're going to give an overview of current projects. They've got quite a few projects underway, and they want to extend an invitation to Mayor Helen and any interested councillors or staff to attend that meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Kimbolton, Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. They've done an excellent job of doing part of the hall up inside. They've turned the back area that was in effect not used into a meeting room. We carpeted it, we painted it, put a desk and chairs with a view to being able to use it for community meetings. They've also had a little friction in the community around security cameras, and they are going to explore connecting into the fielding network system. I appreciate that they think that that's a good option, so they're working through that. Other than that, they're in reasonably good heart. The local play centre is under pressure to close because basically the number of attendees, they've got enough enrolled, but there's a shortfall of hours that they attend. So therefore, it's running its $40,000 a year in deficit. But really, the cure for that is to actually get the enrolled pupils to actually attend, and that would fix the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, Kiwatia.
That's next week, the 26th of June.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, Pahongana Valley.
Your primary concern of the committee up there is emergency management would be number 1. Pahongana's particularly prone to those events, so they want to be well prepared. A couple of roading issues. Opportunity for me to perhaps promote a couple of events coming up the Pahongana Hall that the Hall Committee and the committee has organised. A couple of really good comedy shows coming up in July, I think they are. Tickets online. See the Pahongana Valley Facebook site. I expect they'll be sold out, but they've run a couple of really good events there recently, and these 2 will be no exception.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Short, Sanson, and then Tangi Moana.
Thank you. Sanson focusing on some large history signs. They've been doing a lot of work on the research. the sign's going to be quite big, and they're planning to do 1 or 2 a year, because it is actually quite a big project and take 3 or 4 years to do that, and will probably require some grant funding to assist with that project. We had the principal of Sanson School came to talk to us and highlighted a few issues. I've emailed James. A lot of it was around the shared car park between the hall and the school, and where vehicles are going. The lines have faded. There used to be quite designated areas, and trucks and camper vans are sort of parking right beside the playground in school time. So he's having to go out there and finding the drivers and having to ask them just to move a little bit further away. Tangamoana, they're working through their revised community response plan, and working with Hannah and Nick. They've made a few decisions. They've decided that the school is going to be the civil defence point rather than the hall, because the hall is almost below sea level, and if there was a flooding event, the hall actually could be impacted, and the school's a little bit higher, not a lot higher, but so they are now talking through getting the school a generator. And they also found that the school was not on the Civil Defence VHF program, so that's been worked through as well. The second issue that was discussed the other day that I just wanted to bring to the attention of the roading department, deer. They're having, it's the roar and everything at the moment. They're having deer dash across the road a lot down there. One of the signs down there is in a situation where there's no households can see it, and it's been nicked about 4 times in the last 12 months. They want to know, and the roading contractor is very quick at replacing it. The new sign was up before the minutes came in, so obviously Higgins sign guys checking it all the time. They're actually wondering whether it could go a bit further back where there's sort of line of sight from a few households, and it might not get stolen as much. But one of the members had seen a solar sign flashing like those school signs somewhere down in the Horowhenua, and wondered if there was anything that what the cost would be to look into one of those. Now, we talked about this on Monday night. On Tuesday morning, I got a text to say another car versus deer had happened that morning, and it was another write-off. That's 4 this year, 4 cars being written off, because there's just a little area through the sand dunes where there's a narrow cutting and trees, and the deer leap out over the fence in front of traffic, and you get very little warning. But also, they're saying people get blind to signs, and they just wondered whether a flashing sign might remind people to actually slow down a little bit, and if a deer dashes out in front of you, you might miss it. So I will talk to someone in Roding about that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Councillor Quigley, Waituna West.
Thank you. It's quite a fiery little meeting. It started off with the roading rates differentials. They didn't like that. But anyway, I got out of there alive. There was a few things they were concerned about. That was one. I told them that Negan had gone. I don't know where the painting was at. She was looking into the hall painting, so I'm going to follow that up. They've noted here that Negan has moved on to Class 102 pastures. I think that's a joke. Verge mowing. I've been to see Green by Nature after the last meeting. They wanted it's supposed to be mowed up to the last school sign, and he confirmed that that's where it's supposed to be mowed up to, but it's obviously not getting through to the man on the mower. So I'll go and see him again about that. Kiwi also had to face community displeasure to do with the rates rise, particularly when farming and business is in a serious state of recession, and that perhaps our elected representatives have no tenuous grip on reality. That's us.
Thank you.
And, there's something else here. By the Tupperway Road, washes out all the time, and it needs to, the maintenance here needs to be constant up there, and it's gravel, loose gravel. It's quite dangerous. And this is one of, notice that the back roads get forgotten. This is one of those necessities, unlike CBD parking, which nobody cares about except the council. So you're that pretty happy?
Thank you. It sounds like Waituna West are not feeling the love at the moment.
No.
There's a few things in there that if they get liaised with the roading team, have a look at. So thank you for that. And we have 2 sets of minutes from the Youth Council. Councillor Blackmore's not here, but I know that they're well into organising their Youth Fest event, which I encourage you all to check out on the Saturday, the 6th of July. Right, so let's move to the officers' report. We're on 10.1 and we're on page 69. This is the CEDA Statement of Intent, the final version here for us for adoption today. Welcome up the team. Welcome Jerry and Bobby. Great to see you again. Thank you.
Good. I just needed to check where we're at.
Right, we're just
doing the long-term plan today, just in case there's any.
just mute some of our attendees on Zoom. Right, and welcome Marie to introduce this topic to us.
Morena. So this report's to formalise, sorry, I've grabbed the wrong paper. This one, that's my next paper. So I'd like to welcome Jerry and Bobby, and I think they're also going to introduce Felicia shortly from CEDA. So CEDA provided the draft statement of intent in April, and the proposed direction and content was supported by council, and there were no significant changes required by the elected members, nor were there from Palmerston North City Council as our shareholding partner. And CEDA presented their final report yesterday to Palmerston North City Council, which was agreed, and are in attendance now to answer any questions or comments. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Marie. Jerry, is there anything you'd like to highlight before we open it up for conversation?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly to introduce Felicia Mackenzie-All, who's sitting behind us, who's our latest addition to the CEDA team, who's in the Marcoms team, who's joining us to see how we do things around here. So she joined us yesterday and today, so we said this would be a good meeting for her to come to. No, look, there's no highlights other than to say there were, as Marie said, there was no written feedback in terms of alterations required. There were a couple of minor typo changes which are not impactful at all. But look, we're really excited about how this statement of intent is actioning the letter of expectation we received earlier in the year. Very, very excited about how that's already started to create activity and conversations, particularly with the district around key activities. The new one that's appearing in 2024-25 is the growth in the CBD for fielding, which we're really excited about. And we've already engaged with some fantastic work with Ross and the team around the hotel motel conversation, which has been fantastic, and expecting a report from that soon. So we're in a good position to move forward into 2024-25. I think with Felicia coming on board, I've been in this role for 2.5 years, and it's the first time we've had a full team. So really, really excited to bring that strength of numbers into the mahi and make the conversation grow and all the efforts for the district work well. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jerry. Bobby, as chair, any comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that this is now my third SOI, and I'm really proud of the work that the team have done in putting it together, but also in the focus that we've got going forward. I think it's very succinct and very easy to report against, and very clear on what it is we're going to achieve in the coming, 1, 2, 3 to 20 years. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's open it up for discussion. Any questions, comments to our CEDA team? based on this document. Councillor Belsky.
Oh, no, thanks for this opportunity to share a couple of, well, one thing. Mary, my wife, picked up your latest tramping and access to our different reserves brochure. And you had the Rangiwahia Scenic Reserve as Kitchener Park. And quite a big mistake in that brochure. We emailed it straight back to Janet and she said, oh dear, you need a chocolate fish to pick that up. But I just, you know, these are expenses. Have you got in place proofreading of these things before they go to the publisher?
Thanks for that, councillor. No, look, I wasn't aware of that, but it's good to see that Janet responded quickly, which she always does when she gets these things. Look, we produce a lot of collateral, and as was in this document, is the odd thing you look at and you go, oops, we probably should have done that slightly differently. So often we do get things proofread for sure, but there are things that, to use a sporting term, go through to the keeper that you don't see. So we're really reliant on the good will and observation of people who are deep inside the conversation to feed those to us. What I'll be looking for in that space is making sure that we rectify it as quickly as possible. So we'll make sure that we just keep that done. So I'd encourage all other councillors, officers and other people in the district to let us know if there's any other inaccuracies in our reporting or collateral, and we'll fix it as quick as we can.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for all of this, guys. But I've got a question for you, which actually is a question I've been asked and I haven't been able to articulate an answer to. And that is, I've been asked what the relevance of the treaty is in terms of the investment our ratepayers make into economic development. Now, I haven't been able to articulate an answer to that.
Yep. So look, we see ourselves as a Tiriti-led organisation, or at least on the journey to being that way. About 2 weeks ago, we had a fantastic workshop, which we invited all of our shareholders and stakeholders to. I think we had about 40 people in that event. And I think Bobby would agree that it was a fantastic event. I've done 2 or 3 of these, and it was the best one I've been to, which was fantastic. Look, we find our commitment to the treaty and to mana whenua across both of our rohi to be very important. I'll give you a great example. We had the Itipu Agri Summit on over the last couple of days, and there was a very strong theme in that conference around the value of the Māori economy and what's it going to mean in terms of how we push ahead with very, very key conversations that we've started, in fact, already in the district around how can we do companion or riparian planting on farm to incorporate, native berries into separating livestock from waterways, how that can turn what could potentially be non-productive land into new product. That engages with a young researcher at Ridditt Institute in Palmerston North who's been doing this work and turning this berry into this alternative coffee. So look, there's a lot of different ways in which we engage in that way. Tainui Woodmass, who's our Māori relationship manager, is doing an absolutely outstanding job at linking with all of our iwi partners. And we're very, very clear that we see that as a partnership, not a stakeholder relationship. It's about building strong relationships so that we can move conversations forward and relationships forward. And then when we have something that we need to ask, the conversation becomes much easier. So look, it's a very, very important part of what we do. And we're very proud of how we're taking that relationship with all of our iwi partners forward.
So if I may, Your Worship, excuse me, thanks, Jerry. I'm not quite sure that I could articulate that into a 2-sentence response to a ratepayer that asked me that question. However, just in terms of the Maori economy, which you've mentioned, what data or how do you determine what is actually Maori economy? Because recently, a very good article I thought written by Professor Robert McCulloch, who's a professor of macroeconomics at Auckland University, around the Maori economy and actually what defines the Maori economy.
Yep.
Now, my understanding is that Te Puru Kaukari have one method of doing that. Now, whether that's accurate or not, or whether that actually defines Maori economy, because Professor McCulloch actually asserts that there's no Pakeha economy, there's no Maori economy, it's an economy. but that's one expert's opinion. But so when you refer to the Maori economy, what data or what in your view compromises Maori business or Maori economy?
Yep.
Because my understanding is TPK use a formula that says if 50% of wage earners in a business of Maori descent, that actually constitutes Maori economy. So I'd just like some clarification on what you think it is.
Cool. If I can just go back to the first comment, I'll work with Tainui to make sure that we can provide a pithy response that you can take back to any elected members to your constituents who want to understand what it means, so we can work on that for you. Look, in terms of the Māori economy, there's a couple of measures that we use. One is businesses that identify as Māori businesses. IMBI has a definition for that as well, which I think relates to the makeup of a board. So we look at it in that sense. I can't give you the figure off the top of my head, but one of the themes in the conference over the last couple of days was the growth in the Māori economy is significant. We are very aware that in the next few years, we're going to have iwi in this region going into post-settlement organisations, which I think is going to be important for the growth in those businesses as well. And they have a significant, as I understand it, interest in primary sector. So I think there will be some very key, progress in that area for us as an organisation. I don't know if anyone else around the table wants to comment on that. I'm certainly not an expert on the Māori economy, but we certainly see it as a significant part of what we do.
If I could, Jerry, I think the confusion for me is that there seems to be so many different data sets that actually that quantify that. And I think it would be useful if TPK have got one, MBIE have got another, perhaps you guys have got another one as well, is that there is some clarity around actually how you define that. Because as a mere layperson, I haven't actually been able to find out exactly what the determination or the definition is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, look, we use the definitions. We don't have our own definition. We adopt the definitions that we see in the business and the Māori business frameworks, I guess. But what we'll do is two things. We'll do that pithy short statement, but we'll also go away and work on the definition and bring that back. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Jerry, for the work that you do for our district, our region. I think you do a great job. And this statement of intent, I think, is it's the culmination of quite a lot of work, and it's a bit different. And I think it's very positive. Clearly, there are some issues we want CEDA working on that particularly relate to the Manawatu district. But of course, we're very much part of the Manawatu region, including Palmerston North City as well. We understand all that, and where they go, we go, and to some extent the other way around as well. Look, I've got a bit of an off-track question, but it is something that is interesting. When you're trying to attract business here, or even retain business, which regions would you say would be our biggest competition? And when we miss out, who beats us?
Great question. And I think the way that we tend to look at this, councillor, is through who would be our best allies. And one of the things that's very, very clear when you look at government policy statements that are coming out from the new government, there is a big push towards regionality needs to be bigger than it currently is. So think about the Central North Island as when you think of it from an economic development agency, there's 8 economic development agencies from Taranaki across Whanganui, Hawke's Bay through to Wellington. And so we're doing a lot of work to try to bring together those groups to do that kind of regional play. And it'll play out in conversations, for instance, around, roading infrastructure, how we link up the economic powerhouse of the Central North Island so that there's a benefit across the wider Central North Island than just trying to handpick where it might sit. Because sometimes that conversation becomes who barks the loudest. So we want it to be coordinated. Look, the thing that's going to be really critical as we go through 2024-25, and I know that one of the economists who spoke recently last week, I can't remember which one it was, said that as sure as day follows night, that after a difficult 2024, early 2025, things are going to ramp up again. We need to be in a position across both of our shareholders to be able to be competitive against what the other regions are offering. And I mean that by, I think this council has made a really significant move in that business-friendly position. So when we're looking at things like motel or hotel development, for example, we're going to need proactive councils who consent quickly, who are competitive with incentives for businesses to move here, landowners who are willing to, take part in the conversation. We've had a conversation recently with a developer who's looking at doing something in the centre of Fielding, which is great. And CEDA has to play its role as well, which is bringing, in our part, potentially a hotel management company to the table. So I think the message is that rather than thinking about who we're competing against, is that we just need to be doing everything as good as we can so that when people look at where they're going to stick that investment, that they choose us. Final part of that is in the hotel conversation, there is one field of thought that we'd be better off trying to go for a deal which had more than one hotel in it, which means we'd need to be in cahoots with other regions. So potentially looking at how that might work as well. So that Central North Island nexus, I think, is very, very important for us going forward.
Thank you. It was a great answer. It didn't answer my question, but it was a really good answer. It was a really good answer, and I'm really happy with it. I don't want you to go anymore.
Yeah. I did preface it by saying I thought the question was potentially looking at it from slightly the wrong angle, which is we need to be getting into bed with other people as opposed to having that fight down the street of who's got the best positioning.
As I said, it was a very good answer.
Thank you. I have a question probably for Marie. This statement of intent is dated 2024-25. My understanding was to reduce the amount of time and resourcing and effort that councils and CEDA put into these statements, that we were going to do a 3-year one, so that we set the direction, we agree on what the content is, and we let CEDA get on with it. Can someone update me on that, why this one is only for 1 year again?
Yeah, that was more through the statement of expectation from us and Palmerston North City Council. We still mentioned that there would be an annual statement of intent, which it may just need a little tweaking each year, but that was the statement of expectation, was 3 years.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So we're hanging on to that, which I think is important. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou, morena, morena. Firstly, I also want to echo some of the statements of the compliments on the statement of intent. It's wonderful. Just to also add to Councillor Lebowski, there's just a couple of typos again in some of the Māori kupuho, the Māori words. And sometimes, I just want to give an example. Sometimes a macron can drastically change the meaning of something. So like keke can be cake, but it also can be armpit. So if we just have a look at those macrons, can sometimes just change the whole narrative of what you're saying. I will acknowledge that for me, a lot of the times when we see documents and you see transliterations, it's kind of like that tick box feeling where you're like, oh, that's cute. Every time you all come in, and even when you have typos, I'm always impressed because the meaning behind a lot of the kupuho and the words that are using is really quite deep. So whoever your person is, regardless of the little typos, the macrons, the U's, the A's that we're confused around, well done to the work. And if it's Tānui, he's doing a fantastic job. I also want to acknowledge, because I've been hearing a lot on the Kumaravine, we call it the Kumaravine in the Māori community. They're really great at where they talk a lot to each other. He has done a fantastic job at his engagement. They feel that CEDA is wonderful to work with, and a lot of that is reflected in him. So big mihi to Tānui as well. I want to, provide some support and maybe another piece of information for Councillor Hadfield. Professor Matt Roskridge, who's a local here at Massey, has been in economics for over 2 decades. He does 4 papers in Māori economics, and he's written about 13 academic pieces. That's good for CEDA to know as well. Recently he's even talked about what qualifies in Māori business. He did a big kōrero 2 weeks ago in front of Massey. It qualifies when you're owned by Māori, when it's a Māori initiatives, when it promotes Māori kaupapa. That's what qualifies a business. Really similar to his economic papers. If you have a read of it, it's quite outstanding. So that's another piece. On top of that, one of the things I want to contextualise that's related to, Professor Matt, is that Māori business looks very different depending on the rohe. So kōwhata aspirations and opportunities in business is very different to te reo reo, the rural. And we're also very different to rangitane. So, there's the overarching of what Māori economy looks like, and then there's the contextualising and making it local of what it means to every iwi, and it looks very different. But other than that, well done on your work. Ngā mihi kia koutou.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Look, thanks, Councillor Bill. I think that might make your challenge actually a little bit more difficult, Jerry, I suspect, in terms of coming up with a definitive. Anyhow, so just in terms of, in terms of your other services income, which I presume mostly is government funded, is there any, with the change of government and change of policies and whatever, I note in terms of your other services income through to 27, it's consistent. So you're obviously confident that that's, or you've got contracts in place that last that distance?
That is a brilliant question. So the majority of the funding that's not shareholder derived at the moment is through the Regional Business Partnership. So currently that contract is in play until July 1st next year. We had Andrew Bailey, just make sure I didn't call him the wrong Bailey, because
don't want to get his twin brother.
yeah, that's right. In the region 2 weeks ago, and I think this is a great story for us actually. They, from my understanding, talking to Greg, IMBI was looking around for an exemplar couple of regions for the minister to come to see around that program, and we were selected.
Excellent.
And just so you know, on Monday, we ticked over 321 engagements, and our target for the year is 320. So for the first time in my time in this role, we've actually hit those numbers, which is fantastic. Look, I think there's always a little bit of a risk that as the government's policy statements and approach to the economic downturn roll out, that those contracts will be up for negotiation from July 1 next year. Not quite sure what they look like yet. We had them in the region for about 4 hours, and the conversations were really positive. We are always on the lookout for other sources of funding through the government policy statement shifts, and that's something that we'll continue to do all the way through.
Oh, good luck with that, mate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Nothing further from the team. Otherwise, we have a recommendation on page 69. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that Council agrees with the final statement of intent 2024 to 2025 submitted by the Central Economic Development Agency, attachment 1.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hadfield. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, Bobby, and your team for the work that you do. It's great to have this one ticked off, so that allows you to get on with it, basically. And we look forward to hearing from you again soon. Thank you. Right, so we move to 10.2. We're on page 114. And we have a series of agenda items here in relation to adopting our annual plan. And the first of these is the adoption of the asset management plans. Welcome, Lisa and Francis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so this report seeks approval of the Land Transport Network Activity Management Plan 2024, the Three Waters Asset Management Plan 2024 to 34, and the Community Facilities Asset Management Plan. These documents form the basis for the preparation of the financial information, the funding impact statements, and the performance management framework of the long-term plan. The activity and asset management plans were approved for submission to audit at the 1st of February council meeting, and the those AMPs were audited alongside the consultation document in the draft long-term plan and updated prior to being made available to the public as supporting documents for the long-term plan during our formal consultation period. Table 1 of my report summarises the changes made to these activity and asset management plans following the public consultation and deliberations on submissions received on the draft long-term plan. So changes to the land transport program business case included the reclassification of work categories and the reallocation of the subsidised bid for the Te Aroha Trail between Mount Big School and Ranfurly Road as a result of the updated government policy statement on land transport. No changes were made to the Three Waters Asset Management Plan, and the Community Facilities Asset Management Plans had their CapEx budgets, this involves all 7 of them, changed to resolve errors identified by audit within the CapEx budgets. The activity and asset management plans are required to be adopted by Council prior to the adoption of the long-term plan. So those are attached to the report as attachments A to C. And now welcome any questions.
Thank you. Let's open that up for questions, comments from the team. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Given the changes to some of the government policy and some of the, government policy statements, are we confident? I mean, I noted I think, on page 12 of the, it still refers to Road to Zero, for instance. Now my understanding is Road to Zero's gone west. So, I guess the question I've got, are we comfortable that actually this reflects what we actually currently know, what's on current policy statements?
Through Your Worship. Thank you, Lisa. So probably 2 points. One is yes at a point in time, and there's 2 parts to that. So the asset management plan is always relevant at a point in time. So the section 8 typically refers to the improvement and ongoing sort of development plan. So that's one thing. There's a number of things listed across each of the asset management plans in terms of the ongoing work and things to update. The other part of it is that the government GPS around land transport is still going through its own formal process in terms of approvals, as is the NZTA funding approvals in terms of their work categories. So at a point in time, yes, it's correct. As those things get confirmed and finalised through the government process, excuse me, they will be updated in our asset management plans to reflect that sort of new moment in time, if you like. So we're not going off on a different tangent. We're just waiting for the sort of the formalities to unfold around them. So,
thank you, Hamish. Very clear answer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Underwood.
The Transport Activity Management Plan, 316 pages. I gather that it was a joint effort between Stantec and MDC, but I'm just wondering, got sort of 2 questions. Is it necessary to have such a huge piece of work? Because I can only imagine what it costs the ratepayer to produce it. And I've also got a challenge around case for change 7.0, where there's some statements made about because it's a case for change and they're putting forward a case for change, I think there should be more detail if they're going to make statements like multiple cyclone level events causing significant damage in recent months. These events are also becoming more frequent. And then when they do make a reference down the bottom, their reference just refers to Cyclone Gabriel on 2023 as being their evidence. So just, I personally think that there needs to be more detail around those statements, just because they just seem to be pulled out of the air.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Probably 2 points to that. Unless, Lisa, you wanted to talk to that? Come to yeah. So Lisa's going to pick up some of the other background evidence to that. In terms of the reference to Stantec, we did use an external provider, which is Stantec, to support some of the development of that long-term plan, asset management plan document. The reasoning for that is the NZTA business case, program business business case approach is it's been a bit of a changing minefield over the last number of years. And so from our point of view, it's making sure that we get it right, because that's a key part of making sure that the funding bid to NZTA is robust and accepted. So the community facilities and Three Waters asset management plans are largely done in-house with some support externally. The roading asset management plan was also largely done with in-house expertise, but Stantec provide that kind of external peer review and did write quite a few sections of it as it relates to the NZTA funding requirements and their approach for asset evaluation and the like. Costs aren't as much as you might think. Yes, it's a 300-page document. Don't forget it's a $1.3 billion asset, or give or take. So it's relevant in terms of the amount of work that has to go into it and the size of that asset base, and particularly the investment from NZTA and making sure that their requirements are met. I probably take your point around the Cyclone Gabrielle and climate events as more of a statement. I mean, we've made reference to it across the board in terms of not so much climate change, but climate events, and needing to factor that in terms of resilience across the networks, whether it's wastewater, water, stormwater, or roading, and then to a lesser extent, community facilities. So Lisa's got some commentary around that more broadly, but...
Yeah, through your worship. So the asset management plans are required to reflect the forecasting assumptions of the long-term plan as a whole. And within the forecasting assumption section, there is, all the evidence around the climatic changes that we're expecting. So with the roading network, it also needs to reflect our broader assumptions around, increased frequency and intensity of storm events going forward over the life of the long-term plan.
And I think it's fair to say it's more a question or a statement around resilience than any sort of bold statements around climate change. It's just responding to the climate and climate events. And we know from our existing emergency works expenditure since 2015, June 15 was probably the last big event before 2004. We've had a ton of money that we've had to spend. And so it's reflecting the reality of that resilience investment into our networks, and particularly roading.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Question for Hamish. In some ways, it seems to me this document, well, it's a lengthy, I'm talking about the roading asset management plan. It's a pretty lengthy document, it's around 16 pages, but in some ways it's a bit limited from achieving our individual goals because it's dictated to by the fact that it's 50%, more than 50% funded by NZTA, and in many ways they're calling the shots in terms of what we actually do. Is that correct? And particularly referring to the projects we've tried to get over the line for quite some time now in regards to the state highway that runs through the middle of the district and the roundabouts that we require at various intersections with no sign of any cooperation from NZTA to be able to achieve those goals. I would just wonder if you've got any comment about that.
How long you got, Councillor? So first of all, yes, you're right. NZTA with a 51% far rate are our sort of main sponsor, if you like, in terms of the roading network, with the ratepayer picking up the other 49%. Thank you, Steph. With regard to the decision making, because they are the main contributor or significant contributor, we do have to meet their requirements. If you like, in terms of the asset management approach, the program business case and the 3-yearly works cycle. They fund us on 3-year blocks, and essentially we have to put up a 3-year works program, which is asset data driven and meets sort of their requirements as well. So there is flexibility that we have in the non-subsidised work, but the non-subsidised proportion of our roading asset is very small in terms of how much we spend every year. So we are to a certain extent, or to a large extent, beholden to their requirements. That includes their procurement requirements as well. The other side of it, with NZTA's State Highway 54 running right through the middle of Fielding and our district, you're right, that has been an ongoing battle in terms of prioritisation of what we want, what they're willing to provide, what they're willing to fund, what they're able to fund. The recurring theme from NZTA is that they prioritise everything on a national basis, and whilst it's important to us, and they don't doubt it's important to us, they have to look at it in context of the national network. And given our traffic volumes, given our roading layout and the like, to date, it's never met their prioritisation, if you like, to put it into that funding round. So we have tried, and we continue to try. And I know Mayor Helen, through the Regional Transport Forum and our engagements with NZTA representation and the like, we will continue to try. But it is a frustration that we collectively have. Yeah.
I'm aware that yourself and your worship submitted to that plan not so long ago. Did you get a response from that submission?
We presented council's submission to the Horizons Transport Committee. I don't think we got a response that said, yes, there's a ton of money would spend in the district. It's about regional prioritisation. If you look at where the government sort of policy statements sitting and where the roads of national significance sit, the whole Manawatu area is a bit dark in terms of where the highlighted projects are. Obviously, O2NL will be a link towards the district, and I guess you'd only hope that in the decades to come that type of investment would roll its way through. But as I say, it's all prioritised where the population is, where the growth is and where the demand is. And quite simply, other parts of the country have got more demand than we have. And that's how they look at it. So,
And I think to support what Hamish says, yes, we continue to lobby at the regional transport table. But I think, now with to Utanganui, the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub, and the fact that we're included in that and the growth that brings and the work we're already doing in Turners Road, that growth is happening right now. So that's giving us another reason to keep banging the table. And but we've also had the opportunity, take the opportunity when we're with politicians. And recently when I was in Wellington with a meeting with Shane Jones with Accelerate 25, had the opportunity to talk to Andy Foster, the MP. He's also the chair for Transport. So I was able to share with him, which the roading team gave me, the non-stop emails, information, justification that we have given to various parties, including NZTA, around making State Highway 54 safer where it comes through town, even to the extent of suggesting that government look at where a state highway runs through a urban community, that section of highway gets managed by the local council with the appropriate resourcing from NZTA. I think, they are listening, but again, it's about prioritising it with everyone else. But given our growth, it's not going to go away. So we keep thumping the table. Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, just further to Councillor Campbell's comment on your comments on State Highway 54. I think we all know politicians can hopefully listen. I'd hate to think the percentage of time they actually take any notice of actually what's being said. But are we going to likely end up in a situation, given that we know in the foreseeable future government funding is going to be very tight, and I presume we've got 51% for a little bit of time, is that if we actually want something actionable on terms of our critical areas down Kimbolton Road, probably 3 major intersections, that 3 years' time we'll likely be in the same situation, still talking about it. Politicians will be duck shoving and not wanting to spend money. It's fielding. Are we in a situation in 3 years' time where potentially in the next long-term plan we actually, if we want some action on this, is that we actually might have to buddy front up and actually stick our hands in our ratepayers' pockets if they want a solution quicker than might otherwise eventuate. And I just raise it because actually, if it's, and as we get growth in Maiwa, it's only going to get worse. Combolton Road is going to get busier, and those key intersections around our schools, which is Intermediate, Lytton Street, and then further down for North Street and Fielding Ag, that we might actually have to rethink our contribution to this stuff, and perhaps in that ensuing 3-year period, we actually try and arm wrestle somebody at NZTA to say, look, could we expedite this if we actually made a bit of a contribution? And I just wonder if that's something that we shouldn't be looking at, to be honest. And because when you actually look at some of the, what I call idiotic safety measures that are done, and I think a wire rope between Bulls and Wanganui is sheer lunacy. I've never seen such idiocy in my life. It's just absolutely fruitcake stuff. And we've got actually some significant safety areas, especially around our children. And, where's the priority? So I'd like to think that, one, we can start to have those discussions as a fallback, and that in 3 years' time, actually, we seriously look at factoring some of that into the long-term plan, if that's actually what's required for us to achieve an outcome that's positive for the community.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And but the Bulls to Wanganui barrier through the centre at $104 million, I can assure you that a number of mayors, and particularly the city, we raise it every time and just say, how do you prioritise $104 million to put a barrier down a highway when you've got communities like ours in the city, and everybody's got those issues about safety? If it's a safety issue, you need to rethink your priorities. Hamish.
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, Councillor, I think you're right. It's probably an opportunity to, yes, write that down. There's probably an opportunity to test our community's interest in that, because you're right, it's going to be putting essentially council's hand into the ratepayer pocket further. And we're always looking at where we can not take rates or not increase rates. But if we're going to fund it ourselves outside of NZTA, it's going to have to come from council, and council means ratepayer. There's a potential there in terms of development contributions and the way that the growth-related components of these intersection upgrades intersect. But at the moment, we are not doing that. But in the next 3-year period, there's no reason why we can't start to have those conversations with the community, engage a level of willingness around that, and then make some decisions in 3 years' time.
Yeah, thanks.
Subject to agreement from NZTA that we can actually do that on their network.
I'm not suggesting we put our ratepayers' hand in our ratepayers' pocket for the whole thing, but if we were able to expedite it through some sort of cost share basis, I think we might make a bit of progress.
Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Worship. I also think it's not just State Highway 54; it's also the villages that are main, secondary arterial units, access. That we have in our region, that where we have children coming through, down to like Waituna, West Kiwitea, Halcombe. They all have big traffic through there, and there's a lot of school children with limited pathways. So I think if we're going to look at that, we need to encompass that areas as well.
Thank you. Good point. Thank you. Councillor Balsky.
Oh, Hamish, just on the roading plan in future. I sent you an email, just personal one, on the Gisborne Council, concerned that NZTA were going to lift the emergency work policy from a 1 in 10 year event to a 1 in 20 year event. This is the Mayor of Gisborne. He said we should be really worried about this. So can you elaborate any more on that they are shifting the...
that is correct.
Yep.
That is correct.
That is correct. So there's a submission process underway, which Lisa, we've submitted on that. So for the wider context of that, they're looking at essentially reducing the amount of additional subsidy they provide. So at the moment, it's an extra 20% on top of your base fare rate. So they're looking at reducing that from an extra 20 down to an extra 10, which would be a significant reduction, and then increasing the threshold as to when that subsidy would kick in. So as Mayor Schultz has outlined from a Gisborne point of view, and it would affect us here. If that was to go through as intended during an event, and the big events, there's still a high level of government support and funding. But for most of the day-to-day stuff that we see, it's going to mean a significant extra cost for our ratepayer, because that local share is going to come from us, and that's our roading reserve, which is in deficit, as we know. So it's going to make our situation worse in the medium term.
Okay, right. Let's go to the recommendations on page 114. Three of them set out there. If I could have a mover and a seconder for those, and I don't expect you to read out each of the plans set out there. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I won't read it out all. I won't read it all out. But I do move that the council adopt the Land Transport Network Activity Management Plan 2024, and the council adopt the Three Waters Asset Management Plan 2024-2034, and that the council adopt the Community Facilities Asset Management Plans as listed on page 114 of the council agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ford. Thank you. No further comment. Put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. Right, page 120. Significant step, the adoption of the Manawatu District Council 2024-34 long-term plan. And this report also includes the financial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, the revenue and financing policy, the rates remission and postponement policy, all for adoption prior to the long-term plan. So thank you to the team. Hand over to Shane and David, and welcome Debbie, our auditor. Welcome.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I guess we've finally got to the pointy end of quite a journey, and welcome Debbie here as our Audit Director. I'll just get David to run through some things, and I guess then I'll get Debbie to comment, and then we'll open it up to council.
Thank you, Shane. Good morning, councillors. So yes, I'll just do a very, very quick 1-minute introduction on the roadmap for what we're going to talk about today. Then we'll hand over to Debbie just to talk about the audit that has happened. And then I'll come back just to talk about the changes that have happened. I was thinking of how to introduce this, and I wanted to refer to two literary heavyweights. The first being world famous Manawatu now, Councillor Blackmore, who mentioned that for most of the documents, for all of the documents that form the LTP, these have come across this table many times. They should be very, very familiar to you now. So, so hopefully there are no surprises in there, which brings into mind the words of another literary genius, T.S. Eliot. And I'm going to paraphrase him that at this stage, it almost feels like the LTP process is dying with a whimper and not with a bang. I think that's a great sign of really robust discussions that have happened around this table, discussions with the community that's happened over the last year. And I've been very impressed by the way that this council and you as councillors have approached this and really got the hard issues on the table, discussed them really well, and I think it's led to a very good LTP. In a few minutes, I will just take you through the order of the resolutions that we will work through, which is pretty important, the way that we have ordered them. We have made a slight change to one of the resolutions, the balanced budget resolution, so I just want to talk about that. I'll take you through a very short change table outlining what's happened since we sent you out the report for adoption. Audits have given us a few suggestions, so I want to refer to some of the notable ones of those. But first, I think it's best to hand over to Debbie just to say a few words from the Audit New Zealand perspective.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to be sitting at this end of the process. As I was driving over this morning, I couldn't help but think it was just over 6 months ago that I sat here and sort of talked you through the audit process and the LTP. And that 6 months ago, Three Waters were out at that time. A lot has changed, and there's still a lot of change in the sector, and I just do want to acknowledge that. Also, councils have had an extension to timelines, and some councils have deferred for a year. So I just wanted to acknowledge this council for being in this position at this time, which is probably quite early. I know a lot of councils are probably adopting next week, and a number of them in July, and some next year. So I do want to acknowledge that. And I just wanted to say that I'm also really pleased to say that we're in a position to issue an unmodified audit opinion, and that includes no emphasis of matter within the audit opinion either. So it is really a clean opinion. It's always a bit of a process, I think. There's always potentially a little bit of tension between audit and council, just as we're going through everything. But I did want to acknowledge the work and the support that your team has provided to my team. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Just in terms of the report itself, there are quite a few resolutions in this report, and they're in order for a reason. The first resolution just reflects that there are some policies that we will be adopting after the long-term plan has been approved. We'll revisit the halls management policy and the development of financial contributions policy, which have links, of course, to what you agree today. The significance and engagement policy, you'll remember we discussed that as part of the process as well, where there needs to be some work in that we agreed around this table. So we will be doing that as well following the long-term plan. So we just note that. The next resolution's about the balanced budget. So we do have some changes to the wording that we're just recommending. It's to bring it into line with Section 100 of the Local Government Act. Whilst the one we had in the original report wasn't incorrect, this just lines it up a little bit more. So what we're recommending there is we change that to, in accordance with Section 102 of the Local Government Act, the council approves that years 1 to 6 of the long-term plan 2024 will not have a balanced budget and agrees that it's a financially prudent approach. So that just lines it up very well with that language in the Act. We then go through the strategies. We approve those. So that's the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy, which again you have seen multiple times as this has gone through. The revenue and financing policy and the rates remission and postponement policy and nets, we'll approve those. They have been out for legal review. So you would have noted in the LTP that they have changed a little bit in response to what our legal advisors have advised. So those are the changes there. And then we come up to the biggie, which is the actual adoption of the annual report. Sorry, the annual report, the adoption of the long-term plan. That's the blast from the past when I refer to annual reports. So we adopt the long-term plan, and then following on that, we've just got a resolution there that we authorise the Chief Executive to approve any final minor edits and also any material corrections. So those are the recommendations we're putting up. Following that, there's a number of papers that come up which are reliant on the RTP being passed, our financial policies that Amanda will bring to the table, so that will be up after this paper has been passed through. Just in terms of the changes, so there have been a few changes that Audit have raised with us since we sent the papers out to you. I thought it was important just to run through a table quickly, talking about the most notable ones of those. So Steph, hopefully we can bring that table onto the screen. These have been shared, I believe, with you this morning. So I'll just run quickly through them. Hopefully it won't take too much time. Of course, as with any big document like this, there have been minor changes, quite a few minor changes just to correct layout issues. Some mistypes have been picked up, and there's been some small kind of rounding errors in the document. We have kind of corrected those as we've gone along. There are still some to be made. If you would like to see a comprehensive version of all those changes, we can give you a marked up PDF of those, but I thought I'd save you the burden of having a look at those right now. On page 56, there was a note from audit that there was a paragraph there that kind of hung. It was going to lead into the capital growth program graph, which is now included with the benchmark graphs. It was just a hangover from when we first did the first version of it. So we've now deleted that. On page 59, this is something that still has to be added. Audit New Zealand last night asked us to put in a paragraph just outlining why it's prudent to have an unbalanced budget for those first 6 years of the LTP. So we will put in a paragraph just outlining that. On page 180, this refers to the measures about water supply quality. We had a bit of a reference, I think, to old water standards. We have just changed that wording to refer to the new standards, which are the drinking water standards for New Zealand regulations and the Drinking Water Quality Assurance Rules 2022. So that just makes sure that we're measuring ourselves up to what the correct standards are. Page 240, there was a graph there that we had in the benchmark graphs called rates, limits and planned increases. Audit New Zealand picked up, it duplicates most of the information on the next graph in that page, which is the rates increases affordability benchmark. So they've suggested we just delete that graph out. The rates, limits and planned increases graph is actually on page 54 in the financial strategy. So it just makes it a little bit clearer. We're not repeating the same kind of information multiple times, one after the other. Page 242, this is about depreciation funding, talking about why we don't fund part of the roading spend that we do, as well as community halls. For roading, we don't depreciate the part that's subsidised by NZTA. Correct me if I get the wording wrong here, Amanda.
I will just fix that.
Yes.
We do depreciate it, we don't fund it. So you'll recall that when we have depreciation, we rate for depreciation so that we have a fund to renew in the future. We don't rate for the portion that's funded by NZTA because NZTA will fund that in the future and we would be perceived to be double dipping if we would rate for it as well. So we do depreciate it, we just don't rate for it.
Okay, and low priority community halls, there is the assumption there that they will not be replaced, or if they are, there'll be third party funding that comes in there. So again, the depreciation on those is not funded. So we just specified that in those bullets. Page 244, we had inadvertently dropped out the standard introduction to the debt affordability benchmark graph. This is a statutory requirement, so we've just added that in. To page 261, again, we inadvertently left out property in the funding mix table. It was part of the original revenue funds financing policy when it came through the table first time. So we've just added those words in, so it's included now. Last night, we also had a note from audit just reminding us that we need to put reference to local water done well into our assumptions around legislative change. We have a paragraph that we will drop in on that. Lisa drafted that last night, so that will come through. And in section 7 and the appendices around transport funding, and assumption 3, Audit New Zealand have asked us to put in a sentence just explaining how NZTA have indicated they will drop our subsidy that we will receive in August 2024, that we're not going to be changing our budgets at the moment, but once kind of confirmation of what those changes have come through from NZTA, we will review those, and any unspent funds that are a result of that which we have rated for, we will use those to replenish the roading reserve. So just a little note stating that. So those are the changes that are notable. I don't think they're material, but we thought it was important to bring those to your attention. So I think that is pretty much my introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, team. Yeah, I guess a question, Debbie, in relation to these sort of last minute changes, while they don't make material differences, is it, is it just something that comes with the process that some of this turns up, we keep hearing last night. So the pressure on everybody to get this correct, is that just acceptable as part of what audit does?
So we do raise issues as they come up, but we also receive the final document, and it does take a while for us to go through. So we do feed it back as soon as we get it. It is quite a pressure point to get the report that we receive, go through it, find the issues, feed it back. And some of the things we have raised before, but it hasn't come through in the final document. So it's just making sure that everything is there. So because the time that you finish your deliberations and we got the final report, just to adoption does take a bit of time.
Thank you. Oh, absolutely. I understand how complex it is, and but just want to commend the team for everybody involved in that process to get it to where we are today. So there are a number of recommendations on page 120, but first, are there any comments, questions anyone wishes to ask? Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just a question, page 141, and then reference to page 263. I question that. I think it's wrong, but so I believe that what the CBD redevelopment went from 85% CBD rate, 15% general rate, to 100% general rate. But it says that it went from 100% general to 75 general, 25 targeted CBD. So it looks more similar to the parking one, but still different.
So this is in relation to the
past CBD,
the repayment of the past loan. Okay.
So can I speak on that?
Amanda.
Just because I've looked at these numbers a few times, so I just double check because that's what you do. The current situation, which is the existing budgets that we have, is 15% general rate, 85% targeted for CBD development. So, Councillor, you are right there. And the deliberated decision was to go 100% to general rate. So it should talk 15 and 85, and then it should talk going to 100%.
Yep.
And that's what's in the budgets. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're agreeing that those figures need to be adjusted. Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Her Worship, I was just going to echo Amanda because I motioned it with Michael. So.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Hadfield?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. On the council agenda, page 131, 132, around community facilities group activity. It's my view that some of the statements incorrect as outlined in the council agenda, and that is that we agreed that the Community Hub Library would be now referred to as Manawatu Community Hub Libraries. And then the next statement says references to the community hub have been replaced with Te Ahuru Moai. Now, it's my view that council did not agree to that. So the functionality of the building, in my view, that we agreed to was that, the community hub come library as a function was exactly that. The name of the building itself is what's been gifted. So it's my view that, as it says on page 132, that changes recommended by officers and supported by elected members is actually incorrect, because it's my view that we didn't agree to that. So on that basis, I think that's incorrect. And then potentially changes need to be made to pages 122 and 126 on the draft long-term plans. That's my understanding of what we actually discussed at council and what we agreed. And whether colleagues agree with me or not is another thing, but it's my understanding of where we got to.
Thank you. That's my understanding too, that the gifted name refers to the building, and the service that's conducted in there is the Manawatu Community Hub Libraries. Is there any comment from our team in regards to pointing that one out to have that corrected?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we'll look into that. I made some updates to the activity statement around the community facilities, and yeah, we worked hard to make it, the name was the building and the services inside was Manawatu Community Hub Library. So it might just be that we've missed that in other places in the document. So we'll look through that and remedy that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, anything else that sits within those changes anyone wants to question, comment on? No? Councillor Ford?
Not to do with the changes, but if I may make a general comment.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. I'd like to say congratulations, Team MDC. This LTP, long-term plan, has been a huge team effort across the operational and governance team for about 2 years. We've worked really hard to get the level of rates increase down from, and these figures are approximate, 30% to 19% to 13% to 7.09%. The last one's correct, the first three are approximate. 7.09% is one of the lowest in New Zealand. And a lot of that, I think, can go back to this council and its predecessor councils have invested well in basic infrastructure, and we have good roads, water, sewerage, stormwater parks, libraries, swimming pool, and many other facilities. Are they perfect? No, but they are good. And this council is excellent, in my opinion, at prioritising the must-haves, and many councils around the region and country will be playing catch-up over the next several years. This long-term plan is a good balance of good business as usual and good infrastructure, modest rates increase, and some new growth projects to improve our district and make life better for those living here. I thank everyone who engaged in the long-term plan process and gave us their opinion. And I'd like to single out and thank our Chief Executive, our executive leadership team, our strategy team, in fact, the whole staff at Team MDC who've worked on this project, because it's pretty much covered everyone. So thank you. Also, Debbie and the audit team, thank you. And certainly the feedback I get is that the relationship with your team has been great, and so I thank you for that. I'm proud to be a member of this governance team who have produced this long-term plan. I think we've worked well together, and despite many challenges, our district is in good heart, and I think we have a very good long-term plan to hopefully adopt. Thank you.
Thank you. I endorse those words. I also had some similar notes there, but so thank you for that. So we come to the recommendations on page 120. Now, it would probably better to refer to the ones on the screen because there are 8, if I recall, and that there have been some amendments. So I'm very happy to move that the council notes the following policies will be reviewed after the long-term plan 2024-2034 is adopted. A, the Hall's management policy, B, significance and engagement policy, C, development and financial contributions policy, and 2, that the council notes year 1 to 6 of the long-term plan. Oh, no, sorry, we've got the amended recommendation, thank you. That in accordance with S100 bracket 2 of the Local Government Act, Shane.
Sorry to interrupt. I think you should take these recommendations
One at a time.
It's quite important that they go in an order. If we do them up, some I don't really fully intend what needs to happen. So I think one at a time would be.
Yeah, thank you. Right, thank you. So let's go back to recommendation 1, noting that the following policies will be reviewed. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ford. Thank you. Any questions, comments, further discussion? None? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right, we go to recommendation 2, that in accordance with S100 bracket 2 of the Local Government Act, the council approves that years 1 to 6 of the long-term plan 2024 to 2034 will not have a balanced budget and agrees that it is a financial prudent approach. Happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadyen. No further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? The motion is carried. 3, that in accordance, we can just pop that up, thank you, that in accordance with section 101A of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the 2024-2034 financial strategy, section 4.1 of the long-term plan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ford. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Recommendation 4, that in accordance with section 101B of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the 2024 to 2054 infrastructure strategy, section 4.2 of the long-term plan. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? The motion is carried. Recommendation 5, that in accordance with the section 102 and 103 of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the revenue and financing policy, section 6.10 of the long-term plan. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Ford. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. And 6, that in accordance with sections 102 and 109 of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the rates remission and postponement policy, section 6.11. Have a seconder, please. Councillor McFadyen. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. 7, that in accordance with section 93 of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the long-term plan 2024 to 2034, including the report from Audit New Zealand. Seconded, Councillor Ford. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. And 8, that the Chief Executive be authorised to approve any final minor edits and any immaterial corrections required to the long-term plan 2024 to 2034 in order to finalise the documents. Seconded, Councillor Ford. Thank you. Any discussion? I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? The motion is carried. And with that, we have adopted our long-term plan. Well done, team. And as Councillor Ford said, it's Team MDC. It has been a team effort, and I just want to thank everybody, including the community, the pre-engagement that we did with our community, followed by the consultation, the engagement by the community. And I'm pleased to say the direction of council through this long-term plan, when we see with the results of the long-term plan, has been supported by our community. So well done. Right, so we're now on to 10.4. Thank you, Debbie. And can you please pass on the thanks to your team? Thank you. So we're on page 148, and this is the adoption of the rates resolution now that we have a long-term plan. Welcome, Amanda.
Good morning. So this is the next part of our process. You've adopted the budgets, which also outlines, there's a statement in there called the FIS, Funding Impact Statement Rates. It outlines the rates that we are about to strike. So in the long-term plan itself, is a little bit more detailed around the actual rates. It talks about what the rate is, why we rate for it, a very brief explanation, and the total rates that are being sought for this particular rate. The rates resolution itself is a standalone resolution. It's extremely important. This is what allows us to actually strike our rates. If we get this wrong, you cannot restrike. So this is extremely important. As you can tell, I've said it like 3 times in the first sentence. The resolution itself is legally reviewed. It's also checked by Audit New Zealand and checked, I don't know how many times, by my team as well. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward, really. Take any questions?
Thank you. Open it up for discussion, questions, comments. As Amanda says, it is part of the discussion we've had and putting it out through the various categories. No questions? Thank you. So there are a number of recommendations there. Can we take these recommendations as a whole, or do we? Yeah, thank
in
you.
the past, no one's read it out.
Yeah, no. I don't expect anyone to read each of those categories out. So there is a recommendation on page 148. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the Manawatu District Council, in pursuance of the exercise of powers conferred on it by the Local Government Rating Act 2002 and any other empowering provisions, resolves to set the following rates on rating units in the district for the financial year commencing 1 July 2024 and ending 30 June 2025. All rates and amounts expressed are inclusive of goods and services tax, and they refer to A through to V on pages 148 through to 153.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, look, I think this is a positive move that we've, as part of the long-term planning process, we've shuffled made an effort, I think, to simplify the rating system for the council, which, in my opinion, has been incredibly complex for a long, long time, ever since the Manawatu District Council was reconstituted in the current form. We've had 3 rating categories. Now we've got 2, which is a positive move. So I'd like to suggest perhaps that as part of the next long-term plan deliberations, the council considers removing the Parks and Reserves targeted rate as well. If you note on page 149, the differences between the Parks and Reserve differentials and the general rate are, in my opinion, is insignificant. And that would be another big step towards simplifying the rating system. If there's to be any adjustment between the 7 categories across the district, that can be achieved by changing that, just changing the differential figure. We don't need, well, we didn't need 3 categories, and I don't think we need 2. So it's just a thought for next the next LTP round.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments? No. So we've had a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Right. Having adopted the long-term plan and set the rates, with that we will adjourn our meeting and take a morning tea break, and be back at 1:45, please.
Congratulations.
Let's reconvene our meeting, and we're on item 10.5. We're up to the adoption of the borrowing resolution on page 157. Amanda, hand it to you.
Thank you. So as the Mayor has said, this is to allow us to borrow. Now, the reasons why we borrow is to fund parts of our capital works programs, specifically the new capital spends, and in growth if we have a shortfall between the development contributions coming in and the capital spend being done, as you're all aware. So this falls out of the bottom of your LTP, you could say. This is actually the part of how we, parts of how we fund it. The first part was the rates, and this part is around the loans. The resolution outlines that in the next upcoming year, we are expecting to borrow 13.986 million. And if you read through the resolution, read through the report, we're also expecting to spend to pay back 4.19 million, and that is our regular repayment. So recognising that as time goes on, we repay our loans, that's recognising the portion that is being used from the community at any one time. We also have the loan buffers, or what we call the debt cap. We've got the LGFA, so the Local Government Funding Agency buffer, and that is calculated on your 4 ratios that we've talked about all the time, sitting in our liability management policy. And then we have our self-imposed buffer, which is 5 mil less than the Local Government Funding Agency, which is also in the financial strategy, and I think it's also included in our liability management policy. So this year, the net borrowings is expected to be 9.78 mil. So that's taking the new borrowings less the repayments and the number that we expect it to move by. I will just point out that the closing balance assumption of 113 mil is entirely dependent on us spending everything in next year's budget, but it's also dependent on how we land this year. So having spent everything this year, having repaid everything this year, then that's where we'd be. So like anything, it's based on a range of assumptions. The biggest risk I see to the closing or the opening, depending on how you want to see it, is whether we have actually done the asset sales that we've budgeted over multiple years and whether they've come to fruition, because those asset sales are what we pay. We have also chosen to repay towards our debt cap. If we don't, then our closing balance will be a bit higher than that. So, okay, so yeah, new debt 13.98, repaying 4.1. That's our normal repayment, but it is assuming that in this current year that we're in, we will have done some asset sales related debt repayment. Happy to take any questions, hopefully. Oh, sorry, there is also a comment around refinancing. So you're called to fit within our what do you call them, our bands to be compliant. We have a mix between fixed and floating, and we want things to mature over a period of time. So we don't want everything maturing on year 15 or year 10. We have things maturing. Some of that debt matures and then just gets rolled over, so that's called refinancing. And the reason why we'd have that is to help at the time that we are borrowing, we're looking at what the interest rates are at that time. So we wouldn't at this point borrow long term at the interest rates because they're not that great. We'd be borrowing shorter terms. And we do have around $11.5 million at the moment that's sitting on what we call a commercial paper, which is a very short term, between 4 to 6 months, because it's taking into account that there's quite a cheap interest rate through the Local Government Funding Agency at this point in time. When that comes up for renewal, if the interest rates are looking a bit ugly in that commercial rate paper, we may choose to put it fixed or floating. So we do have the churn, which is the refinancing, more based around recognising to grab those better rates. Happy to take any questions.
Really good explanation. Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
With the 4 million being our regular repayment annually, I looked at the Treasury report that was in with this agenda on page 67, which has got a table of our lending, and the first 5 had maturity rates that have just expired.
Yeah.
So that those 5 loans added up to 22.8 million. So that means that we haven't repaid those on maturity. We've refinanced.
Yeah. And that'll be dependent on, so we repay based on a loan table. There's a set loan calculation over a certain number of years, and it tells you how much your repayment should be. And I'm not very au fait with it. I use the calculator to do that. But again, the debt that's coming up or just come up, some of that will have been repaid. We will have taken the opportunity to, as it matures, pay down the 3 or 4 mil that we're budgeted. The rest would have been refinanced because it's not ready to be repaid yet. So when we draw the debt, we pick a time in the future based on the interest rates, not necessarily the whole life of the loan. So some of our debt, our policy talks about debt for an asset is put down for, it's called another word, but anyway, we borrow for the life of the asset or 30 years, whichever is less. So if we were borrowing for a car, you're not going to borrow it for 30 years, you'd borrow it for 5. If you're borrowing for a building, say it has an 80-year life, we wouldn't borrow it for 80, we'd only be able to borrow it for up to 30. But actually we'd look at the interest rates and go, the 30-year interest rate is way too ugly for us to look ourselves into. We might borrow it for 5 years and revisit it when the interest rate comes up. Hope I explained that.
May I continue?
Absolutely.
So with those 5 loans that came to maturity, that was how you were fixing the financing policy that wasn't compliant?
Yes, they're taken into account when they come up. It gives us the ability to go, right, how do we make ourselves compliant? So there's that plus any new borrowings.
And if I may just ask one more question. With the debt cap that LGFA set, do we know what criteria they use for that? Because, if our debt cap keeps going up by 5 million per year, we've got to have a ratepayer base to be able to, repay that if we keep taking it up. Do you know what criteria they use when they're setting these debt caps, or do they just say every year we'll put it up by 5 million?
Nope. So you'll recall in our revenue, in our liability management policy, we have the 4 criteria for our debt cap. That is the LGFA criteria. It's a formula driven. Now off the top of my head, and I'm really bad at this. So one of the criteria is based on a percentage of your rates. One is a interest percentage to your revenue. Another is your financial accommodation. And I'm missing one. So there's 4 criteria, and whichever one is triggered first is the cap that applies to us. So yeah, we've talked about it a few times in our debt cap calculation. In essence, LGFA don't change the debt cap. They give us the formula, and our cap changes based on our budgets going forward. So if you increase your revenue, you can borrow more. If you decrease your revenue, you're going to hit your cap.
And by increasing our revenue, we either increase our ratepayer base or we charge them more rates.
Rates, user fees, grants and subsidies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Like you, I'm pretty keen to sort of mature over time, but it's early days for me. I'm certainly going to support the recommendation. I have a question which is sort of somewhat outside this, but to me it is related. When are we going to consider or have a look at whether we apply for the credit rating?
Sure.
And I know we're not committed to doing so, and there's quite a cost to it. But as I understand it, the advantages could be a lower interest rate and being able to borrow significantly more. And that's not what I'm particularly wanting to do, but it just might give us more flexibility. So are we any closer to knowing when that will come to council for consideration?
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor. My intention is to bring it to the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting. I've done most of the work. What we needed to do is confirm the LTP to give us actual firm numbers going forward, because it's always a projection on what you're going to borrow to work out what it is that you could potentially save. So now that we've adopted the LTP, we've got some pretty robust numbers to actually do those calculations on. So we'll bring them through to Audit and Risk, and potentially Audit and Risk may say that we'll do a workshop item on it or whatever. The whole LTP is based on the assumption that we are not credit rated at this point, and because there's a process to go through, but it's definitely on the agenda to come back.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further comments, questions? None. We have 4 recommendations on page 157. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Campbell from a audit and risk. Councillor Short.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that one, that the council authorises the chief executive to borrow new loans up to $13,986,000 to fund the capital projects identified in year 1 of the long-term plan 2024-34. 2, that the council authorises the chief executive to borrow to refinance existing loan facilities as they fall due. Loans can only be refinanced within the terms of the original loan approval as outlined in the financial strategy. 3, that the council authorises the chief executive to negotiate and agree the terms, interest rate payable, type of loan facilities or issues of stock and/or swaps that make up borrowing, to execute any agreements, documents and certifiers in respect of such loans, facilities or stock on behalf of council. And 4, that the borrowing be secured by a debenture trust deed over all rates made from time to time by council under the Local Government Rating Act 2002.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Quigley. Thank you. Any further discussion? None? I'll put those motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motions are carried.
Couldn't hear you, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Right, we go to page 161. This is the adoption of our fees and charges. Welcome back, Ash and Francis.
Awesome, thank you. So fees and charges, just these come out of the funding splits, as you know, and the other side of the coin to rates. So these are what we charge the community for services and facilities. Most of these will have increased by normal amounts due to inflation. There are some that will have increased by more because some of those funding splits were adjusted as a part of the long-term plan. There are 3 lots of fees specifically excluded from this report. So that's animal control, which were adopted back in May because there were earlier processes we needed to get out of the way for that. Planning service charges and Food Act fees and charges, which are part of the late report, which we'll get to in due course. And the only other thing to note is that the development contribution fees at this point have been kept exactly the same as they were for the 23-24 year, pending the review of the policy. So once that policy is reviewed, those fees will also be reviewed then. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So these are the fees and charges that we have discussed and been through consultation with. Any discussion, questions, comments? That's probably a good idea. Thank you, Shane.
Council, just to update you on why that development contribution fees component is there in the recommendations. The development contribution policy relies on information that comes out of their long-term plan. So we've basically got it sitting there ready to go, but it required the adoption of the long-term plan so the figures can flow out of the budgets, out of the growth projects, out of everything that's now been approved, and then we can dump that into the development contributions policy. And the intent is that will come to council in a fortnight's time, and that will go out for consultation. So 2 reasons for that. We've had legal advice. A number of us sat down with a lawyer earlier this week, and the advice was that the changes trigger consultation, but also we're up for the 3-year legislative review for the policy anyway. So we'll kill a whole lot of birds with one stone, and we'll bring that to council in the next fortnight for your approval to take it out for consultation, along with the fees that are associated with it.
Can I add something?
Thank you, Amanda.
It was just been pointed out just after we did the resolution. Sorry, Ash, I've screwed up your work. So by keeping the development contribution fees at the same rate that they are currently, we actually need to add to the resolution that they are the same as last year plus PPI, which is the Producers Price Index, because under our policy and under the legislation, they go up by PPI each year. and we'd completely missed that. If we don't do that and a developer came along and applied on the 2nd of July, they'd be paying a fee that will potentially be monetarily cheaper than on the 29th of June because of the PPI increase. So we just need to add into the resolution that that the development contribution fees being adopted are the 2023 to 24 rates with PPI to be added, if that's okay.
Do we need to expand on the PPI?
It's the one that gets published as per the policy. You could just put as per the policy. It's actually written in the DC policy, and we go and look it up each year and we add it to the price. Otherwise, we would be under recovering for the period of time between now and when you adopt the next policy.
Thank you. Steph, have you grabbed that? Thank you. Right, thank you. So we have no further discussion on that. There's 2 recommendations there. The second one has the amended with PPI to be added. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'm happy to move that the council approve the activity fees and charges for the financial year commencing 1 July 24 and ending 30 June 25 as detailed in the attachment to this report. That the council notes that the development contribution fees are being adopted at the 23-24 rates with PPI to be added until the development contributions policy is updated and has completed the consultation process, after which new fees will be proposed for adoption.
Thank you. Have a mover. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor McFadyen. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Ash. Right. Right, so that brings us to the end of the motions in regards to the long-term plan. So thank you to everyone involved in those. So we're on page 209 and 10.7. This is the traffic bylaw update. Welcome, Hamish and Matt.
But we'll get to the real meat of the day. Matt's going to take us through this report.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, good morning. It's one of the basic things that we manage as part of our rating network, and under the adopted traffic safety and road use bylaw, we have the authority under resolution to specify where people can or cannot park, the classes of vehicle or users that can and cannot park, bus stops, for example, loading zones and no stopping lines throughout our district. The last known plan was developed in around 2004, and most of it is still entirely accurate. However, obviously we had boundary changes with Palmerston North in the past, and there have been some gradual changes. And one of the key changes, obviously, that's fundamental changes for council, is that we now want to manage time-restricted parking with fines that we've developed in the CBD, and all the consultations went through for that. But in order to do so, we must pass a resolution by bylaw that we have identified those zones and locations to do that. And we've taken the opportunity to look at all restrictions under the bylaw from sections 9 to 13 under part 2 of that bylaw, and then the regulation of vehicle and road use was also encapsulated under part 3, which defines things like heavy vehicle prohibition zones and one-way systems, which we have very limited number, but we do have some. Obviously, Manchester Square is one such place. If we obviously don't have an up-to-date register, then not only ourselves, but obviously NZ Police would find themselves in a legal quandary as to how they could actually prosecute and see through any fines or other punishments. And so obviously it means that we obviously can just keep an eye on the district as a whole and manage. So moving forward from there, we can obviously update that list through any consultations and acceptance from requests from the members of the public to change any of our roads and the road use. And it basically covers us under the Land Transport Acts as well.
So thank you, Matt. So yes, so essentially we're not looking to consult on or change the bylaw. That's a key point. We're just updating the schedule that applies to the existing bylaw, as Matt's outlined. So it should be a fairly administrative rubber stamp to, as Matt's outlined. But between us, we've got John in the back as well. So we'll attempt to ask any specifically technical questions that might come our way. Particularly looking at Deputy Mayor Ford.
Thank you. I have a question. So we've listed all the new time enforcement limits for the CBD. We have told the public they are the times that we've set are a trial. And we know already from the feedback that there is some interest to review some of those, particularly the 1 hour parking. So if and when we do that review, does that mean we need to bring this back and change it all again?
Yes, so subject to obviously consultations with the public and decision making, then any changes that we'd want to make to the register would be put to council to adopt through resolution, and the register would be updated accordingly. And then setting the date of that new register would then set when we can enforce those new limits on any changes you wish to make.
Thank you. So have we set a time frame to complete that review of this new CBD enforced parking time limits?
Do you mean that the existing times that we want to review, or you want to set an update?
No, the new, we said they were a trial.
Oh, yes.
We've told the community that, so I'm just wanting to know, well, when does that trial finish and we review based on the feedback? Shane?
There's been a number of things occurring. The first part is that we have been having one of our staff out there monitoring the parking at the moment, but that's not enforcing, just monitoring. And the reports back have been pretty positive, actually, that the signage appears to have, had an effect on people's knowledge. There was one problem area, but it would appear that a member of the public's been able to sort that out. Especially, I think it helped that he rang head office and got some response from them.
Good on him.
So that seems to have worked. In terms of the trial, we are just going to continue that work, and we are looking at a number of things now around the enforcement. Rather than just rush out and spend the money on the enforcement, we are doing a little bit of work in behind the scenes as to what that enforcement might look like, including perhaps contracting a resource from a neighbouring council to do that, or looking at technology. There's now technology that you can fit to a car and drive around and it does it all itself. And so the trial will be as long as, I guess, as it takes for us to work through those options.
Yeah, and I think, Shane, just to add to that, by adopting this, we're not cutting ourselves off for the next 5 years, 6 years, or anything like that. We can update the schedule through council resolution at any time. As Matt's outlined, it's been 20 odd years since we did the last tidy up.
Yeah.
So we can let the trial unfold for as long as it needs to. We can wrap up any changes there, plus any other rats and mice, and we can change it in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, or not change it. So we're not backing ourselves into a corner by adopting this today. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, so that being said then, I'm wondering from the need for this to come to council, it seems to me to be largely operational matter. I don't see any point in you having to come to council every time you want to put a new yellow line somewhere or change, the parking. It seems to me that it's going to stop some flexibility in your ability to be able to do that sort of stuff. And we've had issues before when, members of the public come in here and complained about yellow lines, for example, just down the bridge here, I remember a couple of years ago.
Same thing.
That decision never came to council for approval for starters. That was operational. I don't think we really want to get involved in that stuff. That's my opinion. I don't see the need for us to approve a register.
It's essentially around the legalisation of that enforcement under a bylaw that council has sitting on its books. You're right, and to be honest, there are areas where we will make changes, in terms of some of those behaviours. Those are the sort of things that you'd wrap up and tidy up in this process. But
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I've got a bit of sympathy for Councillor Campbell's comments. However, at the end of the day, if members of the public complain, we're normally the first port of call. So, we bear the brunt of operational stuff. And without getting too detailed, I'd suggest that the cycleway down North Street's a prime example of actually where a bit of input might have been actually a little bit useful. So rather than leaving that entirely operational, it's just with all due respect. But given that there's no issue, and I think Mayor Helen's right. There's two things, and I think the deputy mayor is actually in a very good position to monitor from his office what happens down in the parking area. But so long as we've got flexibility, I think we're right, because actually, we must consider also at the moment that there is a cost of living crisis. People aren't actually coming into town and spending as much as they used to. So I wouldn't entirely suggest that putting up parking signs is the only reason that the parking situation may be slightly improving. However, I do support not rushing into, as Shane has said, not rushing into, an enforcement process that may not be totally necessary. Having said that, some of the 60-minute parking restrictions actually should never have been 60 minutes, and I think we're always going to have that discussion. So long as we can change them, and change them simply and easily, that's honky-dory.
Thank you. Councillor Belsky.
I was surprised to read here on 2.5 on page 210 that the police were unable to prosecute trespassers or transgressors that have, for example, driven down the wrong way of a one-way road. Do we have to make that as a bylaw for the police to actually action that? And it's the same with big vehicles coming through town. Do we actually have to have that as a bylaw?
So through you, Worship. So we have that bylaw in place. What we're talking about here today is legalising all of those site-specific limits and restrictions to give that enforcement ability to the police.
Oh,
So yes, we do. Putting a sign up doesn't make it so. Putting a sign up and then legally registering it does, in terms of a technical enforcement process. Yeah.
Goodness me. Okay, thanks.
So you're saying that driving down the wrong side of a one-way road, that's something we still have to account for, even though that's the rules of the country?
I think in that example, it was not gazetted, so it was still not legally a one-way road. Even the sign
Oh, I
was in place.
see. I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which is this bit we're fixing here with all of the time-limited parking in town. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. I didn't find the register particularly user-friendly. Is it available in other formats, like under by control, like all the ones to do with parking, all the ones to do with restrictions of vehicles? Can it be rearranged in that format? Or like if somebody was wanting to look at it, and I can see that the streets are alphabetical, but they may be wanting to look at road restrictions, and it would be good to have those all together. Just a suggestion, because, sorry, it said in 3.1 that vehicle and road use, some of those things have been added to this. Are they the ones in Sanson or were they already there? Because I'm just trying to see whether it's the yellow highlighted ones that are the new ones, or whether there are other new ones in there as well, because the highlighted ones seem to be to do with parking.
Yes, so the Sanson signage was part of the original 2004. traffic bylaws and the register. The table is written obviously because we had a limited amount of time to actually examine the entirety of the district. We would like to create obviously a full aerial graphical representation of everything, as with some of those map references, particularly for our off-street parking and those sections that MDC controls, which doesn't have a road or centre line aligned to them. But in the meantime, obviously, it just needs an explicit register of locations. We would look to develop that and make it much more friendly over a bit of time. But obviously, with the limit of the 1st of July in terms of running the trial for the Fielding CBD parking, obviously we needed to have that in place. And as quickly as possible, and to cover everything, we just put it into that singular format. And yes, we do recognise that it isn't particularly user friendly in that current state.
May I? So the people who in Sanson who are complaining about the heavy trucks going down their street, it's already in the bylaw that they shouldn't be there. Is that?
That's correct. It was in the
Since
2004.
So it's just not being enforced. Like there's, I assume, signs there saying no heavy vehicles.
That's correct. Yeah.
And are we looking at or investigating having heavy vehicle restrictions within this town centre? Because I know I myself have received complaints from people like on Denby Street, Derby Street, where they're watching how many trucks go past every day.
Yeah, no, there's no plans to review the existing class restrictions on any of our roads at this time. But it obviously can be raised, and we could look into it. But yeah, as a general rule, we don't want to restrict traffic, any particular classes of traffic on our road network.
I think if I could tell you, Worship, just to pick up those 2 points, as the Te Tanganui sort of takes shape, and there's quite a bit of work that will be done in terms of road upgrades and potential realignments and that sort of flow of traffic on a regional sort of district-wide level or inter-district. So there's probably a trigger in there, I would think, in terms of those natural routes that trucks would take and what it means in terms of our local urban footprint and Fielding. So whilst there's nothing in place now, and I don't think there's probably any triggers at this point in time to do that, I can see that being a logical point in years to come when we'd actually look at that whole transportation network between Te Tanganui, Fielding and the state highway networks.
Thank you. Matt, so are you saying that council no longer has a heavy traffic bypass bylaw?
No, those signs are not regulatory in nature. They are to advise advise vehicles to take those correct routes. But the only thing that would come across that is covered under something else in the bylaw, but not part of this register, are things like no engine braking, for example. Signs can be placed up, and they already are in place for all our urban limits. But no, we don't have we can put additional signage out to direct traffic in the roads we wish them to use, but it's not covered under the bylaw for prohibition in that sense. The Sanson signage, for example, obviously is the regulatory signage that is in place, and that can be enforceable. But the black and white signage that with instruction doesn't have that qualification.
Thank you. I'm not talking about signage. I'm talking about my recollection in years gone by that council had a bylaw that said the heavy traffic bypass for Fielding was north, south, east, west streets. Are you saying that no longer is there?
We would have to review the bylaws, I think. We'd have to review see if the bylaws were in there, whether they'd been rescinded in an updated bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you. My view is that if you deal with the basically intersection issues on 54 and where South Street comes out, the trucks will bypass the town because it'll be easier for them. And it's as simple as, I know it's not simple because we're struggling to do it, but they will bypass the town providing they can get from South Street out onto State Highway 54. They come into town that way and go, but when they come back, they come down through the middle of town because they can't get across the road.
Yeah.
That is
Correct.
exactly right. And those are the
Correct.
sorts of things that we can do to try and influence driver behaviour in addition to the tools like bylaws that we have. Yep.
Thank you. Right, anything further, any questions, further questions on this one? Otherwise, we do have a recommendation on page 209. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Ford.
I move that council pursuant to part 2, sections 9 to 13 and part 3, section 18 of the Traffic Safety and Road Use Bylaw 2023 accepts the Parking, Stopping and Vehicle Class Control Register version 2024.1 as a complete record of existing controls in place as of 1st of July 2024.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Belsky. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Right, we now move to page 237. This is our delegations manual. It's simply an amendment. Welcome back, Ash and Francis.
Thanks, Your Worship. So this is a pretty straightforward report. It's fairly administrative. Basically, we're wanting to add the Regulatory Services Manager to section 343B and 343C of the Delegations Manual, which is under the Resource Management Act. And as you recall from earlier meetings, these need to come to you for approval as prescribed by the Act. Chief Executive isn't able to do it on his own. For future, we'll try and group these where we can, but this one in particular is linked to a warrant of authority, so we wanted to get it to you sooner rather than later, just so everything's tied off at our end. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So are there any questions, comments on this? Otherwise, we can go straight to the recommendation. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, happy to go straight to the recommendation, Your Worship. Pretty straightforward. Move that the council adds a Regulatory Services Manager to subsection 343B and 343B. Approval of infringement notices and serving of infringement notices of section 8.2 of the Resource Management Act 1991 of the Delegations Manual.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Short, thank you. Any further discussion? Being none, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ash. Thank you. So we move to page 240, 10.9. This is recording the submissions that have been lodged by council from November last year to the 6th of June this year. And I just really want to acknowledge the team for the work that has been done, because when you look down the list, it is significant, the number of submissions that that we've had to deal with, and particularly thank Lisa and Kemi and the team and all of the people supporting those submissions, and also our submission subgroup for the work that's gone into these. Lisa.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do acknowledge this is a massive team effort, particularly this actual round of submissions. The variety of authors is quite substantial compared to other periods of time. I think because it's been such a busy time, we've had to draw on resources from across council to pull these submissions together. So definitely extend my thanks to everyone that's been involved. So the purpose of this report is to table the submissions listed in paragraph 3.1 of my report. These are the submissions, as Mayor Helen has mentioned, that were lodged between the 24th of November last year and the 6th of June this year. Copies of the submissions are attached in the agenda for your information. Feedback was received from the submissions assessment panel meetings prior to lodgement, so that's mostly by email, and those that were of wider interest were circulated to all of you for feedback before lodgement. Those submissions that are not already included on the website that are in this list will be uploaded to the website to be made available to the public, and that's kind of the one of the reasons that we bring these to you is essentially so that everyone is aware of what we've submitted before it goes out to the public. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I'd happy to go straight to the recommendation, but I'd also like to acknowledge the articulate and erudite manner in which the team actually pull these submissions together, and I do appreciate that there's an awful lot of work goes into it, and I think we do a pretty good job on it, so well done. So happy to move that the council receives and notes the listed submissions lodged on behalf of the Manawatu District Council between 24 November 23 and 6 of June 24.
Thank you. Seconded, councillor Quigley. Thank you. Any further discussion? Put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Right, we're on page 293. You will recall that we've been working with the Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park and the Fielding Civic Centre around their statements of expectation and intent. So this is giving us an update on the commitment that we made time-wise. So Marie, hand it over to you.
Yeah, correct report this time. So this report's to formalise that elected members have agreed that the deadline of 30th of June 24 will not be met for the inaugural statements of intent for Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park and Fielding Civic Centre, which means that it will be a non-compliance as far as the LGA. But given this is a first for both the trusts, it's important that we progress together to ensure we're all comfortable with the expectations and the performance measures. Our progress to date for Fielding Civic Centre, it's highlighted the need to expedite the review of their trust deed and their lease agreement, and so these are going to be done in conjunction with the statement of expectation and statement of intent, so we're working on that. And for Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust, we've met again this week, and we're pretty close to a draft statement of intent with Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park. So just an update of where we're at.
Thank you. Yes, there's been lots of positive work done with all of the parties involved in our council team. So this is just acknowledging for the records that we won't meet the timeframes. Any discussion, comments, questions? Councillor Underwood.
I was just wondering, when breaching the act like that or not meeting the timeframe, there's no penalty, I gather, for that?
No.
No, as long as we bring it to council to say that we're not going to and council accepts that, we can extend that period.
Thank you.
I thought it was prison for first-term councillors.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I think this is entirely sensible, actually, that for both of the trusts, having had this statement of expectation, statement of intent thrust upon essentially volunteers, I think, you know, the first cycle is always going to be a bit challenging. And I think, you know, clearly once we get through the initial hurdles, or the first part of the hop, skip and jump, I suppose you might say, but hopefully once we've done the hop, the skip and the jump, and following years, will actually be pretty easy. So I'm happy to go straight to the recommendation, Your Worship, and move that council notes the agreement that the inaugural statements of intent for the 24-25 year for both Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust and the Fielding Civic Centre Trust will not be finalised by the 30th of June 24, and that the 2024-25 statements of intent for Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust and the Fielding Civic Centre Trust will be finalised in the 2024-25 year, and that future statements of intent will be finalised by the 30th of June of the preceding year.
Thank you. To have a seconder, please. Councillor Short. Any further discussion? Right, if none, I'll put those motions. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Marie. Right, we're on page 297, 10.11. This is the update on the Town Centre Refresh Program. And Shane's going to take us through this, given that Lynn's away sick.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, apologies from Lynn, who is Hi, Manuel. So councillors may or may not recall that there was a requirement for me to bring to council a 10-year plan on the town centre refresh program, which Lynn has outlined in the paper, reasonably high level. I think it needs to be at this stage with the town centre refresh focus group now in place. I would expect that would be something they'd be working on in earnest now to to better detail how that program's going to roll out. It is also worthy to note that we have now got a 10-year budget in the LTP for this work, so we can now move forward with any initiatives we may want to roll out in that refresh. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I have a comment in relation to the table on page 301. Given that this is at a high level, and which Shane has just said exactly the same, I'm concerned that there's some of this is quite detailed, and it's not, and they're not. The actual discussion with the focus group, etc., hasn't been completed. So, not that I'm against any of them, but I'm also keen to keep it high level. So I would like to see that in year 2, it talks about structured planting and street art. I would like to see that becomes that we create a plan for the town centre refresh, rather than in years 3 and 4 actually stating specifics and even locations about where they're going to be. I don't think we're ready for that. We haven't had that discussion. We need a very high level about what is the plan for the CBD refresh and where might it fit best, which will also be dictated to by what other changes we might be making in the overall concept of the CBD. So it's just a comment that I would like to see those specific ones removed and the fact and put in there that we are going to have that discussion and come up with a plan.
Your Worship, you might note that what's there is a proposed program, and the purpose of this was to put something on paper, a starter for 10, and also there was a concept plan done some time ago now and brought to council. This dropped out of that. But the whole idea is this is just a starter for 10. The focus group will work their way through this, and I would be surprised if there isn't quite a number of changes to what's proposed here. But it is simply that it's a proposal, a starter for the focus group to get their teeth into and start working on.
Thank you. Yeah, and I totally support 100% what you're saying, which also backs up why some of the specifics about where they're going to be located, I don't think we're ready to put those into the plan yet. We need to have that discussion. Open it up for further comment. Councillor Underwood.
Just a couple of questions. U1 and 2, the structured planting. Can you just explain what structured planting means?
No, I can't. But look, I just draw your attention to paragraph 3.6, which says the following proposed program of work is an indication only is intended to be explored and finalised during the 24-25 financial year. The budget allows for new physical assets and upgrades to existing assets, blah, blah, blah. So this is a bunch of thoughts put down into years, and more detail, there's a lot more detail to come in terms of the CBD redevelopment. And that's what I would expect the focus group to be working their way through over the next structured planting. I guess that will be in more detail, and there will be concept drawings and there'll be locations and all that devised as part of that program.
It was just the word structured. I'm very careful of language nowadays and what words mean, and just wondering, if it means that we're going to put plants in certain places for certain purposes. I assume that's what structured normally would mean.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what it means. I'll have to let the team work their way through that.
And if I may, just one more. I realise this is only a idea. Year 3 and 4, I noticed these sculptures in a po. knowing in the past how much these normally cost and what there's been uproar in other regions about them. Would you envisage, how much of the $500,000 budget would you envisage a sculpture taking up, do you think?
No idea.
No
But we
idea.
also have to
No
remember,
idea.
councillor Underwood, that that this is kind of a wish list for our CBD, and it will certainly not only be funded through ratepayer. We will be seeking third-party funding, and things like sculptures, street art, absolutely fit perfectly for third-party funding. Same with any changes in lighting or anything like that. We would be seeking to make applications for funding.
Thank you.
Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think, yeah, let's not get in the kitchen. This is just a few thoughts.
Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's been a useful discussion so that we all understand that this isn't set in concrete or in any way, shape or form. And I think the key words are, 3.2, draft only, will require further discussion and stakeholder involvement before being presented to the community as a plan. 3.6.1, indication only. So long as we all have a clear understanding of that's it. We haven't said that structured planting will definitely be happening in year one. That's not the case at all. It's just these are the types of things that will be considered. And then, 3.6.3, the town centre refresh focus group will work with a range of stakeholders and council groups to coordinate the work required. Actually, in 2.7 above, and that's probably quite important. If you go back to page 299, 2.7, there's a list there of 8 bullet points, and these are things that are really not covered directly by the town centre refresh, but they impact. And so what we're doing with the town centre refresh, we'll need to take these things into account. We'll need to liaise and work together on these things. And as Mayor Helen has said, we've got, sounds like a lot of money, $5 million, but really it's not. And a lot of it will be trying to some seed capital, facilitating private investment, and as Helen mentioned, third-party funding as well. So it's, I think 3.3A need to have bang for buck. But I think it's laid out pretty clearly, and it's also in terms of the chief executive having to report to us before the end of this month. I think we've covered what we're trying to do. The project goals, the guiding principles, etc., objectives. I think all that's pretty good, just so long as we understand that the specifics is indication only.
Yep.
So if you wish, I'm happy to recommend.
Thank you.
I will just say too, just as a general comment, that towns and cities are judged by their town and city centres. So visitors to this town, they don't go up Farrison Street, they don't go to West Street, East Street, but they'll come into the town centre and they'll see the Manchester Square and the clock tower, etc. And so an attractive, vibrant and vital town centre will attract business, it will attract residents, and I think this program is very much part of our managed growth strategy. So with that, I'm happy to move that the council accepts the update on the proposed 10-year town centre refresh program and notes that a focus group is formed to help shape the program and final plan and to support stakeholder engagement.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Quigley, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, look, thanks, Your Worship, and totally, just for the record, totally agree with the Deputy Mayor. I think it's also worth noting, which is in the report, the work that Boffa Miskell did for council, I think probably in the last triennium of it. And at the end of the day, something to actually be referenced back to also as a starter for 10.
Completely agree.
Thank you. And that is something we're recommending, that we pull that work out and go through again. So thank you for that. Any further comments? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. Right. The consideration of late item. This is the adoption of the Planning Service Charges and Food Act fees and charges. And welcome back, Ash and Francis.
Thanks, Your Worship. So these, I referenced them earlier. So these are for the service planning charges and the Food Act fees and charges. The reason they're different is because they have to be consulted on as prescribed in their relevant acts. For these ones, the reason this is a late item is because the public consultations closed on Sunday. So we couldn't issue the report on Friday in case we did get submissions over the weekend, because that would have changed what part of the process we're up to. So we didn't get submissions. And if you refer to section 3.5 of the report, highlighted green, that's the current and final stage that we're up to now. So essentially, we're asking you to adopt those fees in the same way that we adopted the earlier ones. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can I just have a reminder, please, of how we did that consultation? Did we specifically go to the businesses who would be impacted by these and invite them so that they were alerted that this is a change that may affect my business, so they had the opportunity to have a say?
No is the honest answer. We conducted it in accordance with the special consultative procedure, so it went to the newspaper, went on our website, etc. But we didn't specifically target food premises or other pertinent users.
Which would explain why we haven't had any specific response, I would suspect. But if that is our process, yeah, there may be some businesses in hindsight who will go, you know, they don't follow the paper or necessarily the council website. Councillor Bell.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm a little bit lost. What page are we on?
These are your late item
items?
papers that were sent to you, emailed separately. Thank you. Shane.
I think the point here is that there is a LGA consultative process that we have to follow for this, and it aligns with the RMA. And whilst we didn't directly target businesses, we don't even go out with our other planning fees and charges to anybody, and there's been significant increase in the building fees and charges. So, you know, in fact, we went out through the special consultative process. There is the ability of those businesses to submit, which they haven't done. So I'm quite comfortable with the process we've used.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not questioning that we have a process that we follow, but the reality is, if we're being realistic, the people who are impacted by these changes of charges, I would doubt we're even aware that we were even discussing them or it was being proposed. And it is a hard one, a balancing act. I appreciate that. Any further discussion on these? Otherwise, there is a recommendation on the front page of that late item.
Oh, and sorry, can I just highlight the first part we've already done, so it's just the
Oh,
second
yes,
part
we
need to
did.
do.
We did that earlier today, so there's just the second part of that. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? And for the recommendation that's up on the screen. Councillor Short.
Such as the bottom one, isn't it?
Yes.
I'd like to recommend that the council adopt the planning service charges and Food Act fees and charges for the 2024-25 financial year commencing 1st of July 2024 and ending 30th of June 2025 as detailed in the attachment to this report.
Thank you. So that's moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor McFadyen, thank you. Any further discussion? None. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ash. So that brings us to item 12, which is our public excluded business. And I will move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely confirmation of previous minutes, and secondly, the renewal of the building services contract. So I have moved that. So I have a seconder, please, Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.